Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Mormon Stories Podcast. We're in the middle of our epic deep dive, multi-hour exploration of the Purves family of Joanna and Scott Purves and three of their four children, Maddie, Sophie, and Jake. We send our love to Lily, who is working today and who is also sick. And we're super excited for you guys being willing to do this. So thank you.
You're welcome. We're glad to do it.
So far, we've talked about Scott and Joanna's early years in the church, their missions, falling in love. We've talked about them raising their family in the church, culminating in Scott's service as bishop, and I think it's okay to say Joanna's service as bishop's wife, and all of her callings and their callings in young men's and young women's, culminating in Scott serving the bishop, Rick, or as bishop, and then having good and bad experiences as bishop, including a really difficult stake president. And we ended last episode with the good and the bad of being a Mormon bishop, the good including being able to help people, staying busy, staying focused, working with the youth, and the tough stuff sometimes being things like having difficult stake presidents, and just how draining it is and how perfectionistic and demanding it can be. And we really appreciated, Jake, your vulnerability as you were so sensitive to how tough it was on your mom. And of course, Joanna, your sensitivity of how tough it was on Scott. On Scott. So, all right. So now we're hitting around in the timeline of their story. We're going to hit 2008. They're in California. Again, we're in Davis, kind of Sacramento area, Davis, California. We're going to be talking about Prop 8, and we're going to be talking about how in the world does a power couple in Mormonism, in the mission field, how could they ever leave the church? How could a bishop and his wife and the power couple leave the church? What's it like to deal with Prop 8 in California? And then we're going to talk about their happy surprise or shocking surprise, whatever it was at the time, when their daughter Maddie comes out as lesbian to them. And then we'll end by talking about how do you rebuild a life and a family without Orthodox Mormonism, because that's hard. And maybe it's awesome. So we'll see. So where do we go now?
Prop 8.
Prop 8.
And to get to Prop 8, we have to go backwards to Prop 22.
Okay.
So when I was a bishopric counselor early on, Proposition 22 in California amended the state family code of the Constitution to say that marriage is one man and one woman. And so Prop 8 was the second time around. But a lot of non-Californians don't know, but we did this 8 years before. I think it was 8 or...
Yeah,
I don't know how many years before.
When Stuart Mattis committed suicide in 2000, it was over Prop 22 in California. And this is the young man who returned missionary, did reparative therapy, could marry a woman, but couldn't ungay himself, ends up driving up to the steps of his, is it Los Gatos ward or chapel?
It's pronounced Los Gatos, but yeah.
And pins a note to his chest that says, "Do not resuscitate." And he shoots himself on the steps of his stake center here in California. Yes. And that was during Prop 22 when I was working at Microsoft.
Oh, okay.
And I'm like, why is some kid shooting himself at the steps of the church? You know, like, I didn't get it yet, right?
Got it, yeah.
But that was the first time I'm like, whoa, the stakes are pretty high. So anyway, that's Prop 22.
Yeah. So the crossover between Prop 22 and the church, at least here, so I was in the bishopric. I was first counselor in the bishopric. And the bishop got the assignment that our ward needed to do so many things, put up so many signs, provide so many door knockers, people to put out flyers, all those things. And he gave the assignment to me. And he released me, if you will, not released me. He eliminated all of my other responsibilities in the bishopric during the course of the campaign so that I could focus on that. So for those that don't think that the church and the campaigns were involved, I mean, the church ran it top to bottom. And that was Prop 22. They encouraged us to go speak publicly. I'm sure if somebody wanted to find it on Davis local community television, there's a video of me standing in front of the city council arguing against a local city council measure to promote gay marriage in Davis. I spoke against it. And this is relevant. On the way out, one of the pro-gay marriage people turned to me as I walked out and said, "I hope you never have a gay child." And they were very angry. And of course, I thought they were overreacting because I just didn't get it. Anyway, fast forward, Prop 8, 2008. I got the call to go to Napa, which is about an hour and a half from here. And, well, an hour.
It's wine country, right?
Yeah, wine country. Bad place to be when you're a Mormon, I guess, but beautiful country. But everybody from the Bay Area north to the Oregon border, all the leaders who'd been asked to lead the campaign met at a stake center on a Saturday in Napa. Now, these are relevant details because the church isn't supposed to use their buildings or their communication systems, the directories, the email directories.
As a nonprofit.
Yeah, for political purposes.
Yeah.
Forever and ever, our printed stake directories on the very front of them said, this is not supposed to be used for commercial political uses, et cetera, et cetera. But this was clear. I mean, I was called to be the guy in our town. Our stake president, who I had served with, had just been released as stake president and was called to lead the campaign in Northern California.
Oh my gosh.
Together again. And yeah. And so, but here I was in this meeting, and the meeting basically was him opening the meeting and them turning the TV on and us getting a message from two apostles in the stake center. I think it was Cook. Ballard and Cook.
Yeah.
If I remember right. And basically the message was, this is your priesthood responsibility. That's what it is.
To what?
To pass Prop 8. Because as California goes, so goes the nation, and we've got to protect family. We have to maintain the family that the Lord has established. Gay marriage is evil, and people, and sort of condescendingly, look, we love people who are gay, and we appreciate their concern, but they don't know how this is going to ruin the world if we have gay marriage. And of course, at the time, I still believed what I was taught in the church. I couldn't really explain it, but I just kind of thought, okay, well, gay marriage is bad because, you can't have babies and an eternal family and eternal increase and all that. So, but what bothered me right from day one was we were told that this was our duty, but we were also told that, remember, this isn't the church doing this. This is just us as actively involved citizens who happen to be a bunch of Mormons. And that message was repeated many times. And it bothered me because it just felt dishonest. And I also, in fact, I still think the church and every other church has the First Amendment right to say whatever they want. Just be open about it, for crying out loud. You want to talk about the tax-exempt stuff, that's a different conversation in my mind. But I think, the Catholics speak all the time. Any political season, you see leaders speaking in churches all over the place, whatever. I just couldn't understand why we didn't just say we were doing it. Like, that's what we believed. Why were we ashamed of what we believed?
And that's what you're doing.
Yeah. So we came back to Davis. We organized the stuff. We did the email campaigns. Now, because we had done it before, Davis, California happens to be a very liberal town. It's like a lot like Berkeley in that way. In fact, it tries to be like Berkeley in that way. So knocking on doors for Prop 8 in our town was risky, dangerous. We had couples chased down the street. We had stuff. Anytime a yes on Prop 8 sign went up, which was our side, it was taken down before morning.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Even in your own home? Or?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Really?
Yep. Yeah. And one time somebody took I don't know how many, 50 no on 8 signs and put them all over the lawn at the church.
Nice.
Which means somebody in town knew that it was the Mormons running it.
Yeah.
And so this went on, and then I just kept hearing this same message throughout the campaign that, remember now, we're just doing this as citizens and so on. And I can tell you that except for one Catholic man, everybody in the campaign was Mormon, top to bottom, in our entire ward, stake, region, everybody. Now, there might have been a few here and there that I didn't know about, but it was the Mormons. We ran it. And the real dumb part was that the polls before, like when it was first put on the ballot, and the polls when it closed, I don't think were all that different. I don't think any of the work we did moved the needle very much. Maybe I'm wrong, but it just seems like it passed by a small margin anyway. And I made the mistake of answering the phone when the Sacramento Bee, which is our big newspaper, called for comment. And I made a comment. And my comment was totally innocuous, but I basically said, look, we all have the right to speak our minds, and we should be able to speak, without fear or something like that. It's innocuous. Within a week, we had protesters in front of our office, downtown Davis.
Your insurance office?
Yes. With signs that said, the Purves family hates gays. I had 2 gay employees at the time. One of them went out and spoke to the protester and said, I'm gay, I work here, I'm safe, I love this family, don't. And they had a good conversation, but I was scared to death that we were going to get, people throwing eggs at us and rocks. We lost some clients. There are still some businesses that we work with that I can't go to because they're so angry with me. That's hurtful. I mean, hurtful. It's painful to know that there are people out there who still think that I am a bigot. And I've tried to bridge that gap with some of them, and some of them won't talk to me. And that's tough. With a lot more perspective, I get it. But that's what we went through with Prop 8. What I saw during Prop 8 that I had never seen before was the brethren be dishonest. And more than anything that I'd gone through as a bishop, that took the wind out of my sails. Because people can make mistakes, people can be jerks, whatever, the church is true. But when the apostles tell us to do something dishonest, I didn't know how to react to that. That rocked me. That absolutely rocked me to the core. The fact that I was sort of dragging in, beat up from my bishop years to the Prop 8 thing probably didn't help, but I just couldn't believe it. And honesty and integrity are everything to me. It's what my father taught me. When my dad caught me drinking as a high school kid, he was mad that I drank, but he was furious that I lied to him. I mean, that honesty was everything. And I'm an honest man. I have all kinds of flaws, but I'm honest. And it just, I don't know what to say. I mean, I was just completely shocked. And that was the thing that allowed me to start taking things off the shelf and investigating them. That was 2008. But it was really kind of, after the campaign had done, we were all so tired and sick of it, and then it was back to work. So I was on the High Council. You were probably Young Women's president. Again, she'd done that like 15 times. And but then I started looking at things and investigating things that had always kind of bugged me. And the first one of those things was the word of wisdom, oddly enough. And what really bothered me about the word of wisdom was that I tried to talk about it in some Sunday school classes and with friends, because I could read the Doctrine and Covenants, and it said it was not a commandment, but to bring that up, several times I would say, hey, can we talk about this? And somebody would say, well, why? What, do you just want to go drink? And that bothered me that I was being second guessed. And so that was like the first thing. The hard thing to try and put this timeline back together is it's not a straight line. It's an up and down kind of thing where, Prop 8 ended, and I think I licked my wounds for a while and just served in the callings I was in. I was in the stake Young Men's, and it was, we were fun and busy. We went on trek, and so you kind of get back into the world of it. And then once in a while you take something down and you look at it for a little while and you think about it, and that doesn't sound right. And then you put it back up on the shelf, and then that just kept going for several years. You want to add anything on Prop 8 and that stuff? This is where you want to go with this, is the transition period, right?
Yeah.
So that was 2008, 2009, so on. We just continued to serve. We went on trek. There was one summer where we went on trek as Ma and Pa. She ran girls' camp. I went to scout camp, and we ran the youth conference.
Still pretty devout.
And we my brother-in-law flew our kids to Idaho so they could be babysat with my mom. Like, it was just
so we could go on trek.
Stupid.
Because that's super intense work.
Yeah. And so we continued to operate like that. And then something else would come up, and I would think, I don't understand that. And I would investigate it a little bit. But then I would get scared, and I would knuckle down again, start, more scriptures. Well, let's go to the temple more often. Maybe the reason I don't understand the endowment and I think it's strange is because I don't go enough. And so then I'd go more. And I think everybody who's been through this understands that ebb and flow of, I'm in. Doesn't matter. I'm going to turn off the questions and I'm just going to serve, because that's where the answers are going to be found, is in service and study. Well, once you start studying, just turn it off, right? But once you start studying, that rabbit hole opens up and it goes so many different directions. And then it was the history. Now, I like history anyway, and I love church history, and I was really good at the sanitized version of it. I knew all that stuff.
Joanna wants to jump.
I was going to say it was 2013 or 2014. Maddie graduated in 2013 and went to BYU. And then Scott, with all of these church questions, he asked our stake president and bishop, who are, both friends, he said, can I teach seminary? Because he really wanted to dive into the scriptures. He said, my most spiritual time in my life was when I was on a mission and I was studying the scriptures every day and I was, really into it. And he's like, I want to teach seminary. It's Book of Mormon, my favorite. I love the Book of Mormon. He's like, I can really give it my all, like kind of my, and then the Lord will hear my prayers and I'll know the church is true kind of thing. And so he asked for that calling, and they're like, "Oh, great!"
They're like, "Are you kidding me? You want to do seminary?
So,
you got it."
So,
what do you mean? Know the church is true?
Like have no doubts, because these little things would flutter,
So a way to
the church leaders lying, or
kind of a way to solidify the cracks that were starting to emerge.
Yeah,
yes.
We were going to figure it out.
Yeah.
Maybe they weren't lying about Prop 8. Maybe they just understand it better than I do. Maybe the word of wisdom wasn't a commandment, but then it was a commandment, but there's a revelation. And I remember saying, well, we all know where Section 89 is. We all know that it's practiced as a commandment. Where's the revelation that changed it? Well, why? Do you just want to smoke?
Yeah.
And then that hurts.
But anyway, so then it was that year, Lily was a junior and Jake was a freshman. And so Scott had them in seminary for Book of Mormon. And
I just have to say that my faith crisis started when I kind of lobbied to become a seminary teacher.
Oh, it's the same thing.
And
Wait, did yours start then?
Kind of. I mean, mine started back on my mission and problems on my mission. Yeah. But really, I had a cousin tell me about the Book of Abraham, and I was like, huh? And then I'm like, I needed to go study that church history, because So I started studying church history in depth as a seminary teacher, and that was the beginning of the end.
And yes. I was hoping that by diving in and promising the Lord that I would do everything I could possibly do to learn, and seminary was natural because I knew the next 2 years were Book of Mormon and then Church History, Doctrine and Covenants the second year. And I thought...
Those were my 2 years. Yeah. Book of Mormon first year, Doctrine and Covenants second year.
And I love Book of Mormon. Yeah. So I thought, okay, this will be a good start in.
Yeah.
And when you're teaching seminary, you're studying 2 or 3 hours a day. Every night you come home, you open up your manual, your books, the internet, you start studying, and then you prepare your lesson. Then you get up at 5:30 and you go and teach seminary for an hour, and then you go to work. And it's a busy job. It's also kind of cool, though, because on Saturday and Sunday, there's nothing. And everybody leaves you alone because they don't want to mess with seminary teachers. They're hard to find, So I enjoyed church again. That was really cool about seminary, because I could just go and enjoy church. But as I was teaching seminary, then I started diving in. So I was reading Rough Stone, Rolling first. That was dangerous, but looking back, it's incredibly safe. Then I read Mormon Enigma about Emma Smith.
Oops.
Yeah. And there some cracks opened up, because you start learning about how polygamy actually went down, and how the women were treated, and how some were coerced, and how Emma was in the dark most of the time. And here comes this theme. There's this dishonesty. Joseph wasn't honest about it.
Okay, wait, I have to jump in here. So there's a big difference between Rough Stone Rolling and Mormon Enigma. Like, there's kind of approved books, and then there's like non-approved books. And Mormons usually know the difference.
Yeah.
For me, it started with the Church History in the Fullness of Times, Institute Manual.
Right.
And then it was like, okay, well then I'll do like Leonard Arrington, or I'll do Richard Bushman, or you know what I mean? But once you're jumping to like Michael Quinn or Todd Compton, there has to be some serious kind of those are big steps that not all Mormons feel comfortable jumping to. Did you know you were reading unapproved books at the time?
I actually had looked at Mormon Enigma, and I had read that the authors had received a Mormon History Association award, and Jeffrey Holland was the one that handed it to him. I mean, so that I thought that was safe.
Avery and Tippett?
Yes,
okay.
yeah. And it turns out, of course, they were treated very badly, the authors. And then I went into...
What were you going to say something, Joanna?
Well, I was just going to say, it started, though, with, in the seminary teacher manual, start just looking at footnotes. Scott would follow a footnote, and then he'd look it up, and it would have nothing to do with what he was And so he contacted CES, and he said, you've got a couple of mistakes in this brand new manual that you just did. And the guy responded to him.
End of Book of Mormon year, I send him an email, because the Book of Mormon year, you talk about the Book of Mormon, you don't really talk about the restoration part of the Joseph and the plates. It's all about the content of the book. At the end, there's one lesson, and there's a picture of Joseph with the plates in front of him, and his finger on the plates. Nothing about a seer stone. But this is now late in 2014. The seer stone article had come out.
The essays had come out.
And the essays, so the timing that I was going down the rabbit hole, the essays were starting to come out. So for me, it felt like the whole world was focusing in on this thing that I was dealing with, which was trying to understand the church's history and doctrine and how things changed. And then an essay would come out, and I was like, yes, now we know. I ran out. She dropped something off at my office one day when one of the essays dropped. I ran out to her car in tears, saying, they just released an essay about polygamy. Like, in other words, we're going to have the answers.
Yeah. You were stoked.
Stoked. So excited.
So when the essays were coming out, you were still a believer?
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't realize it was that recent.
Yeah, I was teaching seminary, and I was trying
you weren't like listening to Mormon Stories?
Oh, I was listening to Mormon Stories. I just wasn't telling anybody.
Okay,
yeah,
so
that's dangerous.
Okay, well you skipped that part.
Oh, sorry. I think I listened. In fact, when you first started,
not that it's about me, but just to understand the slide.
Yeah.
Or the education process, like however you want to frame it, right? That's another big step, is listening to something like Mormon
Except
Stories.
It didn't feel like it to me, because you started a million years ago.
2005.
Okay. And you had interviewed a couple of people. I didn't even know what a podcast was. I listened to it on my computer.
Yeah.
Your interview with Greg Prince.
Yeah.
All those years ago. And that didn't sound dangerous to me.
No.
So I don't think I viewed Mormon Stories as dangerous. In fact, you had started the Stay Mormon website and
Stay LDS.
Yeah, or Stay LDS, sorry.
Yeah.
And so I didn't look at you as dangerous.
No, and I was active, unorthodox, and I had interviewed Terrell and Fiona Givens,
right,
and Richard Bushman, and
that Terrell Givens interview you did kept me in for a while. Mm-hmm. It kept me hopeful, I would say, for a while.
Yeah.
We met the Givens when they came to speak in San Francisco at some place. I mean, we were trying to get anything we could find or read or go to help.
The reason I brought up Scott's footnote when you said, how did you go from Ruststone Rolling to Mormon Enigma?
Yeah.
And the whole thing about the footnote and talking to CES, the whole point was that I think talking to CES, and CES didn't even know what he was talking about. I think.
Let me finish that.
I think that gave Scott the green light to think they don't even know. So this history, it shouldn't just come from church history. I need to know history regardless of where it comes from. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I saved this email from this man who was the guy who had approved the manual for the teachers. My email to him was, this is problematic. We have this picture of Joseph in the plates, but it's not accurate. And these kids, because I had gone through this, these kids are going to find out about the seer stone. They're going to wonder why the church is still printing this picture, and they're going to feel lied to. And anyway, I didn't do all those details. I just told him, this isn't accurate. This is problematic. We need to do something about this. He replied to me and said, what's the problem?
Well,
I'm not kidding. Like he didn't know why it was a problem. So I had to respond to him and tell him about the seer stone. This guy wrote the manual. And that's when we were talking together and saying, we're going to have to dive deep and figure this out.
Well, the thing that I was referencing to that also was a typo, they referenced when you're trying to find the book of, the Word of Wisdom, that footnote leads you to, I think it's Lorenzo Snow.
No, it's John Taylor.
John Taylor out praying in the wilderness about polygamy. It's not even talking about Word of Wisdom. But in the footnotes, it's completely erroneous. So Scott's like, wait, this isn't a footnote for this revelation.
Yeah, if you go online right this minute to the online version of the Teacher's Manual, section 89 of the Doctrine and Covenants, and find where it says that by revelation, God changed it to a commandment. They cite a date and a year that John Taylor received the revelation. So here I am. I'm now into my second year. I've read stuff I have never heard before about seer stones and divining rods. D&C 8 and 9 blew me up. And that was in the first week of my second year, because D&C 89 has Oliver Cowdery receiving this thing called the gift of the rod, or the gift of Aaron. And in the handbook, or in the manual, it talks about Aaron and Moses and all this stuff. And if you go back and do the history, it first said the gift of the sprout, then it said the gift of the rod, and then they changed it to Aaron. And so now it's so cloudy, it doesn't even mean anything. But
what it's talking about is the divining rod.
But what it's saying is Joseph received a revelation from God to Oliver saying, your divining rod works, and I, God, made it work. If you go back and read D&C 8, that's what it says. So I taught the kids that in seminary because that's what happened. Our bishop, good man, had given me a book to study along with it, and it was in that book. So I was like, all right, thanks, Bishop. And I taught the kids, but that was the truth. And I was pissed about the dishonesty. So I'm like, these kids are going to get the real truth because they're not going to be in this position I'm in of figuring this stuff out in your 40s and feeling betrayed. I'm going to give it to them now because it's true. Yeah. So what? We use seer stones. Man, if God makes a seer stone work, it works.
Right.
So forward. But when I got to the D&C one and I found this verse, here's the sad part is I see this thing in the manual, and I'm now thinking back to 2008, 2009 when I first was investigating the Word of Wisdom, and I see this in the manual, and I think, this is it. This is the answer. This is the thing I could never find. I felt like, tingles up my spine because this calling that I had volunteered for, in order to overcome this crisis of faith, was answering the first question that I'd had. And then I went to the internet, and when I found it, and it was a revelation about polygamy or something, or reorganizing a stake. It's nothing about the Word of Wisdom. I was looking at it online or in my manual and thinking, they either purposely are deceiving us, or they are so uneducated about their own history, they're willing to just put garbage out there. And that was one of my, there's never one final straw in my view. That was one of the big, heavy whacks to my testimony that this is too many times of dishonesty. It's just too many of them. And then by the time we got to Book of Abraham, I couldn't teach it. That was at the end of that second year.
I had to quit mid-year with Doctrine and Covenants.
Yeah, I was lucky enough that by that point we were close to the end of the year. I just skipped the one lesson. They have one lesson on the Book of Abraham. Mm-hmm. If the Book of Abraham was real and written by the hand of Abraham, it'd be the greatest archaeological find in the history of the world, and we have one chapter on it. Yeah, think about it. It's during that year, two key things happened to me, but to me were relevant.
Is this 14?
15.
Okay, now we're at 15.
And we're not yet to the policy.
Okay.
Two courts happened. Rock Waterman and Kirk and Lindsay Van Allen, if you remember that name.
So Kate and I had already been excommunicated? Because Kate was excommunicated in 2014.
Yes.
And then I was excommunicated in February of 2015.
Yes.
I think Rock may have come before me.
I think he was before you.
But I think the Kirk and Lindsay Van Allen were after. But go ahead.
But so again, my thing is I'm finding all of these problems in history. The priesthood restoration, that one killed me because it's not what we were taught at all. Then I see this story. So Rock Waterman's court, and I don't remember which one was which first. But Rock was called in for disciplinary council. Now, I knew Rock a little bit because he's from Sacramento. And when I was in the middle when I was in the real hard time, I got in touch with him on Facebook and took him out to lunch. And I was explaining to him all these things I'd learned, and I was reading his blog, and he was a believer. Still is. He's still a true believer in the prophet Joseph. I think he's a snufferite, but he loves the Book of Mormon, the prophet Joseph. So we sat down for one of these, 5-hour pizza lunches where we talked for.
By the way, his blog was called Pure Mormonism, right?
Yes.
And he's basically trying to go back to the roots of the statements, whether it's tithing or word of wisdom.
Yeah.
Great blog post that he influenced a lot of people in the day.
His tithing one is amazing.
Yeah. What was really, it wasn't 10% of your income. Right. It was 10% of your increase.
Yeah.
And that sort of thing where he would allow Mormons to take a much less, much more empowered set of choices on how they engage with Mormonism,
right.
I'd say. Yeah.
Right.
So check out Pure Mormonism.
Yeah, check it out. So Rock is a kind soul. I mean, I love the guy.
Yeah.
He was so gentle with me. And by the end of the lunch, all he could tell me was, all these things are problems. But the church, not the church, he wouldn't say that. But he said Joseph was a prophet. The Book of Mormon's true. Hang on to those things. So this is a guy counseling me to stay in the church.
After he had been excommunicated?
No, before.
Right before, okay.
So when I hear Rock's being exed, and Rock sent out like a blast on Facebook, hey, anybody in the area, if you can come defend me, help me out. So I went, and I told him I'll come. And there were 3 of us, I believe, that defended Rock. So I was an active member, teaching seminary. Former bishop, and I stand up in his disciplinary council, and it was the coldest, cruelest meeting I've ever been in.
Yep.
I got up and I spoke, and I told the story about Rock. I'm like, this guy is trying to keep me in. There was a stack of letters that Rock had printed from people who wrote these letters about how he stayed in the church. I know this is familiar to you, but I swear it was 4 inches. I mean, it was just papers of letters and letters and letters. They didn't read any of it.
Okay.
And the stake president was cold, and he asked me one question. He says, okay, Bishop, Rock says to you, he's a member of your ward, and he says to you, I can't sustain the prophet. Would you give him a recommend? And I said, well, no. Because I couldn't as a bishop if you don't sustain the prophet. And they're like, fine. And they actually said to me, you're dismissed. It's rude, and I walked out of there, and I walked out with my head held high, glad that I had defended this guy because I just thought it was so unfair. They had lied about the fact that Salt Lake was involved. They told him Salt Lake called, and then they told him it didn't. So there's, again, dishonesty. And what I kicked myself over was I should have said, no, I wouldn't give him a recommend, but I wouldn't kick him out of the church. And this is crazy. And I missed that. So I was sorry, Rock, I let you down. But so there's that one. And then whichever one came first or second was the Van Allens. This is this couple who was doing the same thing, going down the scripture rabbit hole, and their thing was polygamy. And they came to the conclusion as a couple after study and prayer that polygamy was not ordained of God. It was a mistake. And they created a blog. They wrote exactly 1 blog post. And then by midweek, their stake president was calling them saying, if you don't take that down, we're going to hold a court and excommunicate you. At the same time, they're saying, oh, the Salt Lake doesn't have anything to do with these disciplinary councils. Well, I mean, it was a lie on its face. It just was absolutely not true. Some person on the whatever committee that watches everybody,
strengthening the members committee,
called his stake president, who called him. It's that simple. It's not even a question. This is what happened. And those things, and then we finished the school year, and I kind of had one foot out the door at the end of the school year in 2015, and then the policy hit. And now I still had no idea about my daughter, and the policy hit, and I honestly, it's not that it wasn't a big deal. I was just so shattered over everything else that it was sort of like, sure, why not? Throw it on the fire, and it was terrible. It's a very active family member of ours who sent me the email saying, have you seen this thing? And, he didn't believe it. So, I saw lots of active members saying, no, this is baloney. This is if people forget, but that first day or two, that it came out, there were so many active members who thought it was a bad joke.
Yeah.
Because it didn't make sense. It wasn't the deal killer for me, because I just had so many things piling up that it was one more awful thing. And then I volunteered to teach Sunday school because it was one more time. All right, you and me, Lord, we're going to figure this out. And I taught 2 or 3 lessons in January. And then we got to and it was Book of Mormon in Sunday school, so I was doing Book of Mormon again. I thought this was going to be my last effort to really get a testimony of the Book of Mormon. And then we got to the chapter on the Lamanites' skin turning black because they're evil, and I had to get a sub because I just couldn't do it. And then it was only in a month or so later I told Joanna, I can't do it. And I was standing in my bedroom next to the side of the bed, and she was on her side reading her book or something, and I came out and I said, I don't think the church is true. And I collapsed on the floor, and this sounds so dramatic, but I just cried and cried because it was over. It was just over. This dream of purpose and meaning in my life and all the sacrifice.
Identity.
All of my identity, my heart and soul, my bride, her heart and soul. And it wasn't true. And I was angry, but more than angry, I was so heartbroken because I loved the church. I just loved it. It was me and the Lord and this thing. We were together, and it wasn't real. And I didn't know what was next. I had those moments where I wondered if I would lose my family. I mean, lose your family? It's there's nothing more important to me than my family and the church. And now they're both in peril. It's so devastating. It's crushing. It's just a soul-crushing moment. At the same time, all the confusion and the what ifs and what about this and the what about that, maybe it works because of this, all that stuff, just gone. Because once I finally allowed myself to say, well, maybe the reason I'm so upset and so entangled in all this, emotional and learning these things, is maybe, well, what if it's not true? And so simultaneously, it all made sense, and it crushed my soul. And that was a dark, dark time. Real dark.
What was that like for you, Joanna? Where were your beliefs at this point? And what was it like watching
This is like
them?
February of 16.
Yeah, 3 years ago.
Uh-huh. And through this whole process of years of talking, because we talk. You can tell we're talkers. And we would have discussions at the dinner table about seminary things or things that Scott had found or read. And so, not Maddie, because Maddie was gone, but the other 3 younger kids, like, we'd talk about concerns and like, did you guys hear? I read about this, and so we discussed so much of it for years, and it wasn't just all at once. It was just little bit by little bit. So February of 16, when Scott finally says, I can't do this, I think the whole time through all of these issues, I kept thinking, we're going to get through this. Because I know Scott, I know his, I know God has a plan for us, and I know we're going to get through it, and this is our trial, and we just need to have more faith. And I was going to the temple often and just trying to, I don't know, I think I was in just La La Land thinking it wasn't real, like Scott would snap out of it or something. Anyway, and at night he would read a lot of passages out of Mormon Enigma to me, and we'd talk about it. I'm like, I have no idea, why would God do this, or what,
And I would say to her, have you ever, I would say, you need to read this book. And she'd say, I don't need to. You just read every page to me, because I would read and then read to her. But then we went to Todd Compton, and I couldn't even finish that book. That's in Sacred Loneliness, about all the women who were married to Joseph. I couldn't finish it.
So
then I went to Mike Quinn, and so we read everything.
Grant Palmer.
So
Yeah, absolutely,
I had one night specifically after he had said this, and I remember I was so upset, and I went down to the hall to Maddie's empty bedroom, and I was laying in there, and I broke down and thought, he's really, like, our family's really going to stop, like, this is real. Like, what? We're not going to go to church. We're not going to. And I was the stake young women's leader, and I had camp coming up, and I was and our best friends in the church were the stake president and his wife, and they were called to go to Brazil. They were leaving right after Father's Day to go to Brazil
as a mission president.
President and wife.
That's what you guys wanted.
Yeah. And their oldest and our oldest were at the same age, and anyway,
good friends.
And I didn't want to rock anyone's boat, so we kind of had a plan. I said, "Can we just get through the school year?" Because Corey and Wendy, they're going to go on their mission to Brazil for 3 years. Lily will graduate from high school, and we're going to we went to Europe for 3 weeks that summer, and then we'll come back, have girls camp, and then it's the summer, and then we'll just kind of fade. So it wasn't until it was like the end of August.
Wasn't this the summer I met you guys? Didn't I come to Anaheim?
We met you just after.
We met you January 17.
Yeah. Okay.
So like 6
we're
months
not there
later.
yet.
It was real fresh when we met you.
Okay.
Yeah. So we that was kind of our plan. We told the kids, and again, we're like, keep going to seminary. We're not going to tell anyone that we're leaving the church. We're just going to kind of do this. But then, of course,
because the kids said, "Wait, we're leaving the church, but we still have to go to seminary."
Okay, wait. So let's pull the kids in here. Pass the mics over. All right. So what was it like? Let's start with Maddie, and then we'll go down. What's it like? You guys were raised Orthodox. You loved the church. You were into it. It gave you identity, meaning, purpose, all that stuff. You knew your parents. What's that like? Did you guys have a sense for what was going on before they actually had the conversation with you? What's it like to be teens in an Orthodox Mormon household with parents who are superstars when you start to see the wheels coming off the wagon?
I actually think I wasn't there for all of that.
You were at BYU?
I was at the Y, being
and
this
were you like
perfect.
BYU-ing it up?
At first. But I think, the whole at-home thing, I think they might be able to comment more on, because I wasn't there. It kind of felt like I left for school and everything went to shit. So.
Okay.
Yeah, I remember specifically being in Lily's bedroom, because we had sleepovers a lot. And it was December of 2015. And like my mom said earlier, we always talked about this stuff at dinner and figuring things out together, kind of. And I remember sitting on her bed being like, Lily, I think we're going to leave. I think Dad's done. And
what were you feeling? Were you happy? Were you sad? Were you excited? Were you scared?
I couldn't really comprehend it because it was like our life still. But I was okay with it because our family was still together, and that's what was more important to me. And I knew that it wasn't like our family wasn't being taken apart because this big bad thing was happening. I knew it was because my parents were researching and looking into it, and it was over honesty, which was so huge in our family.
How old were you 4 years ago?
Do the math. 14.
Okay, you were 14 years old.
Yeah, well, because I'm almost 17.
No, you're not. Wow.
Okay.
It was right before Trek.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and something that I've noticed for questioning Mormons that leave the church, when kids are kind of younger, pre-mission, especially 15 and younger, it's often like no big deal. Like, so often the kids are like, I didn't ever believe it anyway, or I hated it. Always hated church. Like, there's something about 18, 19, 20, the mission that just really locks you in. Yeah. So if you're able to kind of deliver the news or make the transition when the kids haven't reached that point, oftentimes it's not only not a big deal to some kids, sometimes it's a huge relief. But anyway, you were saying, Sophie, that you just weren't worried.
Yeah.
Shocked, but not worried.
Yeah, we just go through things together as a family. And I was still at home, so it was like we were going through it together. And I felt like our family was going to make it through no matter what. I wasn't worried at all.
Nice. Jake, what was it like for you?
For me, it was funny because
How old were you?
I was a sophomore in high school. Just finished up my sophomore year.
15, 16?
Yeah, I was 16. So, I was starting to spread my wings a little bit, getting out there.
Wait, what do you mean?
Oh, just exploring some social events and whatnot.
That's very...
Hint.
Partying? Are you saying you were just...
Let's just say in high school, I, maybe took a few liberties that my rest of my siblings didn't. And to be fair, I always found myself very similar to my dad. And I knew that when he was in high school, he wasn't necessarily a saint either. So it wasn't really anything to do with Mormonism. I guess I always knew I was just going to kind of just try my own thing. I don't know. So it really wasn't a huge deal when I didn't see it coming when my dad announced where we told the family. But I was right on board. I was more than happy.
You were like, woohoo!
I was in seminary and she wasn't. So I
I got out of it.
I was like, okay, can I stop going now?
And I'm like, we have to keep the pretense all the way through June.
Well, actually, just adding something onto that, when I was talking to Lily about us leaving, her response was, Sophie, don't say that. Don't say that.
Don't say what?
Don't say that we're leaving. She's like, no, it's going to be fine.
Because she was feeling what?
Scared? She's not here. I wish she was here.
I know she was here.
Yeah, the older they are,
Yeah, she's 4 years older than me.
the older they are, the harder it gets.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because she was a senior in high school, right about to leave for school in Utah. So, I can imagine that must have been really scary for her.
Yeah.
Do you guys remember how they told you? And do you remember what they said?
We were upstairs.
Yeah.
Who was first? Who heard first?
Yeah, probably.
So tell us about when they told
Didn't
you.
we have
Do you
a family
remember?
meeting?
Yeah.
Was it like a big thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, we had a family meeting in our parents' room.
What'd they say? So many
I don't know if it's
so
like the
many
same
parents
thing.
reach out and say, how do we tell our kids when they're young? How do we tell them?
I wish Lily was here.
I know. Lame.
Let me just preface the family meeting that by this point, church history was like eating vegetables to my kids.
Yeah.
Oh, we were tired of it.
Like every night at the dinner table, I'm telling them what I had studied the day before.
Okay, so a lot of people ask that. They're like, well, do you tell your 14-year-olds about polyandry? Do you tell your 14-year-olds about hieroglyphics and the Book of Abraham? Do you tell your kids about peepstones?
Yep.
And a lot of people say, well, no, they don't care. It's too much detail. It's too much minutia. You're nodding your head yes. Why are you nodding your head yes?
Absolutely.
Why?
Because even though you might think they might not get it, if you've raised them in the church, they've been singing about it and seeing pictures about it. And I just think truth is truth. So it's uncomfortable and hard, especially for adults. But I think talking about it, anytime you can be open about something and talk about it, I mean, our kids are pretty smart.
And not only that, remember the whole
Not
time
our
we're
kids,
studying this
kids.
stuff, the intent of studying was to figure it out. We thought our kids were going to come out of this crisis with iron skin. I mean, nothing was ever going to hurt them because they knew everything about the Book of Abraham and seer stones and whatever else. They knew that their dad thought polygamy was bad. So they had permission to think that. But the fact is, they weren't doing that. That was the adults doing that. They were just like, oh, do we have to talk about Sidney Rigdon again? Like, oh, Parley who cares? And
Parley who?
Yeah, and because they're kids. I mean, kids don't get into that the way I think some adults who've been on missions and all those other things have done. But I will say this, then I'll give it back to the kids. But what I remember from that meeting, the only thing I remember, is when it was Jacob's turn to talk, that he got very angry. So he's playing a little cool right now, but and I will always think of this. He broke down in tears, but it was anger. And he said, after what my dad has gone through, I will never go back there. The way they hurt my dad. I was so moved and proud and grateful for my son saying that. It meant so much to me, and I thought about it a million times.
So, Jake, what were you thinking and feeling there?
I mean, he pretty much said it right there. A lot of anger.
What were you mad about? Talk in your own words.
Well, I guess I had seen in just the last, 2 years before we left is, when is pretty much just nightly, like, church history studying. So we were all aware of that.
Okay, really quickly. So when I asked the question, do you tell the kids the minutia, the historical minutia, you were also shaking your head, yes.
Oh, yeah.
And I want to hear from all of you on this. Why should you tell a 14-year-old kid about peepstones or hieroglyphics or polyandry or whatever? Some would say it's not age appropriate.
Well, it's just ridiculous because, I mean...
Shut down.
I mean, that's true.
Do you play League of Legends?
No.
Okay. No. Yes.
No, I'm just saying. Just got shot.
But yeah, I think that's just silly because at 8 years old, that's the age of accountability, right? Isn't that when we choose to become a member and all these eternal stuff? Like what?
Yeah.
So we're supposed to do that, but
so if you're old enough to get baptized, you're not old enough to learn.
Yeah, you can't know about what the founder of your religion did. Like, I don't know.
That's ridiculous.
I also, I don't know. You can say on that.
Just going back to like what my mom said earlier, if you can be open about something and like why would you hide it? Like if they're learning all this stuff that's really affecting them, I want to know about it. And it was pretty natural. It wasn't like, okay, so I learned the other day, blah, blah, blah. It was more like, hey, I read this and it made me feel like this. And we would respond, I don't like that either. Why is that happening? And I agree with Jake too. Like, it's facts and it's history. So why would that ever be not age appropriate?
Like, stop perpetuating the myth. Like, so I'm curious for Maddie, like, because you're away from us.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, we were going through it together, and you were just had no idea.
Yeah, a lot of people have kids at BYU, or they have kids on missions, and they don't know what to do with the kids that are away from home.
Yeah.
So, Maddie, you were just oblivious to all this?
I wasn't oblivious. I knew something was up, but that was about it. I was kind
how'd
of
you
so
know?
wrapped. You can just tell. And I mean, it's my family. We kind of talk about everything. We're very open book kind of people. Or at least, the Purves side of us, not so much the red. But I would come home from school and there would be something new that we would be talking about, or there would be a coffee machine eventually. And so I picked up, and we would be questioning Mormonism, or, we'd be kind of like trying to laugh at things that were funny Mormon things. And so I actually was a little bit relieved because I was going through my own personal thing and was trying to hide that from them. And so I knew that when I picked up some negative things, I was eager for those. And I just kind of let that continue to run its course.
So let's introduce that. What were you going through privately? Because this is important. Like sometimes parents are like, I don't want to disrupt my kids. I don't want to disrupt my wife. I don't want to upset the family. What they sometimes forget to realize is sometimes individuals are secretly, privately going through their own things. And instead of the reveal being earth-shattering and shocking, it's actually salvific based on what people might be going through. So tell us what you were going through.
Yeah, I actually, speaking on the tell your kids, be open with your kids kind of thing too, I can speak to that. There was a lesson learned. Just talk, be open. If I didn't come out to them until I had, years in, I was in a relationship at that point. And I think maybe I would have saved some heartache on both ends if I had just mentioned way earlier on, anytime. And for me, it was sexuality. I should have started with that.
Okay, so let's go back. When did you first start feeling like you weren't heterosexual.
That's funny. In our family, when we talk about someone before they were born, we kind of jokingly say they were still dead then. So like, like Sophie was still dead before Dad was a bishop, kind of thing. And I kind of jokingly do that too. I was still straight then. I was still I wasn't out. I didn't come out to myself until freshman year in college. I met someone, and
But when did you start feeling that way?
Looking back retrospectively, it was very clear to me, I think, earlier than junior high was
talk about that.
Oh, well,
Please.
crushes, I guess.
What do you mean?
On girls. I think girls are pretty.
In middle school?
In middle school and earlier. Well, junior high here. It's a 3-year junior high, 3-year high school kind of thing.
So in junior high,
noticing girls and having crushes on them. And I didn't realize that they were crushes until after I was out to myself and accepting that I was gay and that that's what a crush was. Not necessarily that on him. It was definitely on her.
Looking back, you always kind of felt more attracted to,
I think so,
to girls than boys.
Totally. And I don't really understand all of that, but it was kind of similar to the whole faith thing. Once it's like, I don't think the church is true. As soon as I kind of accepted I think I might be gay, it made sense. It was heartbreaking, but it was clarity. And it was like, now that we know this, now what? It was a red pill moment kind of thing.
Okay, so in junior high, you don't realize this, but you're having crushes on girls more than boys. Did you date boys in high school?
Kind of, a little bit, yeah. I was kind of a dork in high school. So dating boys, well, thanks, Mom.
I wish Lily was here for this part. This is where she'd be perfect.
She was much better about dating boys. She would date boys, and I dated a little bit, but not really. I was kind of so wrapped up in soccer and Mormonism. Those kind of occupied my mind and everything like that.
And that's actually really tough because the church is against kids dating in high school, right? And they keep you so Mormoned up, and high school is busy anyway. A lot of Mormon kids who end up coming out as LGBTQ just never were able to take those formative high school years and date and explore and figure out who they are and what they're attracted to. And it forces them to have to do work in their 20s that they really should have done in their teens. And it's really hard.
Absolutely.
Well, and Maddie, I want you to address the fact that, she was very Mormon. So I just mentioned that she would be the one that they would interview for the school newspaper. If there was something, they'd say, "Oh, Maddie, you're Mormon." So she was the Mormon go-to. She spoke at state conference. She was the camp direct leader for all of the youth. She was this golden Mormon girl. So I don't think, like you said, she probably didn't even have time to process herself. She was so busy leading and
that's how they work.
Being a Mormon.
Okay, so when did you start acting on a crush or identifying a crush or dating or whatever?
Well, I met a girl.
Being bad, with quotes, yeah.
Going down a different kind of rabbit hole of just being a sinner, being homosexual. I was in college. I met a girl.
Wait, you're at BYU. This is BYU. You're at the Lord's University.
I'm at the Lord's University.
Honor Code, Utah County.
Rise and shout. Cougars are out.
You don't date girls as a girl at BYU.
No, absolutely not.
So what happened?
It wasn't even a question. It wasn't a possibility.
So what happened?
Walls. Well, I became friends with somebody, and we just kind of became fast friends.
In the dorms or
in the dorms, and my freshman ward. I was in Helaman Halls. And
which hall?
David John.
Okay,
so the one building in Helaman Halls that has a Jack and Jill thing. So I actually had 3 roommates, and we shared a bathroom rather than have a communal hall bathroom. I in the freshman ward too. I don't know if it was just because of the mission age change was the year before or something like that, but we had a 3-to-1 girl to guy ratio. So we had 3 relief societies and one.
One ward.
One ward had 3 relief societies. Yeah, and wow. I was in the presidency in one of them. I was the first counselor, which is very important. Again, I was first counselor, trying to be really cool and trying to be, this upstanding Mormon. I really wanted to be the spiritual giant that my parents were. I really wanted to go on the mission. I really wanted to come back and just be, have the light of Christ and everything like that. I wanted to go to BYU and be this, rock on, right? But I met this girl and we became friends, and that was all it was. Except I just wanted to be around her all the time. And it was so easy, I think because she did too. And eventually we were just hanging out. Every lunch together, every sports game, everything was just constantly together. I just couldn't I wanted to be around her all the time. And eventually one day we were hanging out in her room. We were spooning on her bed, as friends do.
Wait a minute. Okay, wait a minute.
Can we
Is
bring
that
it
what
back?
friends do, or is that not what friends do?
I'm not
we were totally
sure.
just friends. And
Wait a minute.
and I was the big spoon, and we were just talking and laughing.
You're the big
And
spoon.
well, it's relevant. It's relevant because we were talking, and all of a sudden, it just kind of she just got really quiet and still, and I knew.
Wait, was she a roommate?
Well, we were in the same hall together.
Okay, not roommates.
No, they were just hanging out.
And we were on her bed spooning, and she just got really quiet. And for whatever reason, we weren't talking. I think we were talking about like Avatar: The Last Airbender or something. Right? Just totally off topic. But she got quiet, and I knew that it was about that she was gay. I just knew. And so I asked her. I was like, "Are you okay?" And she kind of, she didn't respond. And then I said, are you afraid that you don't like boys? Is the question that I asked. And I don't remember a lot of things. I have a really fuzzy memory, and I blame it on concussions in soccer in high school, but it could be a million things. But it could be CPTSD and it could be depression. But
what is CPTSD?
I don't know. I just responded. Oh,
Oh, stress disorder. Okay.
I just repeated what you said because you're my mom. But But I remember that. I remember asking her that question with those words, "Are you afraid that you don't like boys?" And then she started kind of sniffling and crying. And then I asked, "Is it me?" And then she broke down. And so at that time, I was still, I sound a little guilty about it. I feel guilty about it now, but I was both like scared and thrilled, even though she was upset. And so we got off the bed. I sat her down. I said, "Don't worry. I love you. I'm going to help you through this. We're going to go to the bishop together. Like we can, get this in." I was still in mission. I know. And I've gone through a lot of therapy processing all of that, but, still got some work to do. But I was still on mission, that I was still straight. It wasn't an option still, but I did feel excited. Guiltily.
That's crazy.
So we never went to the bishop. I just continued. We were just attached to the hip, continued just hanging out one-on-one, and essentially started dating. And eventually I couldn't
So you
be
didn't
in
go
denial.
to the bishop?
Never. Well, not at this point.
Okay.
I eventually couldn't be in denial anymore just because I just kept feeling more and more excited and scared. So I just kind of sat myself down. I think I was probably listening to Coldplay or Adele. And in the middle of the day, it was the afternoon, it wasn't dark yet. And I remember I just kind of sat down and I was just thinking. And I just started thinking with myself. And then I asked myself, and I was talking to Dad about this story earlier. And I said, it's kind of like, when I tell this story, it was as though I was having a conversation between me, myself, and I in my head. And me asked myself, like, well, what if, Maddie, just think for a second, if you could be gay. And my immediate reaction when I imagined being with girls or being with a woman and getting married, and the idea of a wedding sounded so exciting immediately. But the next immediate reaction was, no, that's too good to be true. You can't be with a woman. That's too good to be true. And then the third immediate reaction to that thought was like hitting a brick wall. It was like, what do you mean, Maddie? Like me, myself, or like, what do you mean, too good? And then also, what do you mean too good to be true? It was a kind of a combo 1-2 punch of thinking that means I want it. That means it's a good thing. That is happiness to me. But it also means that I don't think I can have that for whatever reason because it's so good. And it goes back to the whole Purves self-sacrificing thing. It kind of felt like, is this my life that I'm going to sacrifice this happiness? This is my trial. And that hit me like a 1-2 punch. And once I had taken that red pill, that was my red pill moment of coming out to myself, of thinking, oh shit. Or at the time it was, oh dear.
Or shoot.
Uh-oh, or oh, not frick, darn it, heck. Or as Utahns say, oh my heck, which I'm still not over. Anyway, that was my moment. And for me, my whole thing with my relationship to God, with my faith, my spirituality and everything started immediately there with God, and I couldn't figure out why God would make anybody gay. It was the first time and in Prop 8 too, I was in junior high. So in 2008, I was going into 8th grade. I was part of that lucky generation where, 07, I was going into 7th grade, and 08, I was going into 8th grade, junior high, starting up Christians on Girls. And I actually remember one girl that I hope isn't watching, but I had a crush on, asked me, she cornered me at Holmes Junior High, and she was like, Maddie, I love you, but I just got to know, why is your family voting yes on 8? I don't understand. And I was like, well, and I was totally flustered, and I said pretty much just, we love the sin or hate the sin kind of thing. So for me, and that stuck with me, is just, that's kind of just the way it is, and homosexuality was gross and bad and wrong. And so for me to kind of realize, have this red pill moment at BYU, I couldn't understand why God would make somebody so wrong, so broken. And why also then we would be voting yes on 8, or why would Mormons take up this crusade against gay people? Why would God do that to me? I thought I was this upstanding Mormon. I was this girls camp president. I literally had blonde hair and blue eyes. Like I was trying to do everything right. And I was trying to be perfect. And I have since learned to hate that word, because there's no such thing as perfect. So for me, watching my family's journey with the church history was a little bit of a scapegoat for me, because I didn't tell them anything. And that kills me a little bit, because we've mentioned over and over again how I'm just rambling at this point, but I'm hoping I'm getting to a point.
No, you're not. This is pure.
But our the Purves thing is honesty and integrity, and my gut reaction was to be dishonest. Sorry. And it was the first thing that I started doing was lying. I think. Oh, sorry. I just really wanted you to hear the shudders. Anyway, sorry. So for my whole family to be doing this whole thing, it kind of felt like I had a grace period of just letting them be in the dark. And I would figure this out, and then I'd come out of BYU, and then I would tell them or something. But my dad called me in November 2015. Sorry, I don't know why I'm breaking down so much. Oh, thank you. I'm like, last lap.
Keep chugging.
Oh, anyway, my dad called, and every time I'd come home since then. So I went to school 2013, started lying, started being gay. In 2015, I had known that they were figuring out all of their faith stuff, and I knew that there were things that were happening. I knew, and from the siblings, you kids especially, things at seminary, that Dad would talk about things in seminary, and I would come home, and he brought up the whole thing in the hat, and the CES, talking to the CES guy about the seer stone and the hat with Joseph in the plates, and so I knew there was things. But he called in 2015, and I remember a big thing for me in my my relationship to the church. I eventually got to a point of thinking, there is no God here. There's no God at BYU. There's no God in my bishop's office. None of that. And you called and you said that on the phone after the policy. You said, Maddie, there's no God here. And that's when I knew I could come out to you. So I came out then spring of 2016 before Europe. And that was that. Or so it seemed.
Wow.
If I may, there's a part of this story that is important for me, and that is, since we left the church, the timing of Maddie coming out and us leaving the church coincided so close together that a lot of our friends in and out of the church think that we left the church because our daughter came out. And I've actually had people in the community pat me on the back and give me credit for it. Oh man, that was so brave that you came out, or that you left your church because of your gay daughter. And as much as I would like to take that credit, it's not how it went down. Maddie didn't feel safe coming out to us until we were leaving the church. And before she came out to us, she packed her bags because she was pretty sure that that we were going to kick her out. And I never would have sent my child away, ever, ever, ever. And I'm glad I didn't make that mistake earlier in years. So the timing in some ways worked out well because we were in a place where we could hear that news and not act badly. But it crushed me. It was so painful to know that she thought there was a possibility. And then I started thinking about what was she thinking when she was packing her bag? And was she thinking about how far she would drive tonight? And the thought that my little girl would have to think those things about how we would treat her. That was devastating because she's my baby. That's it. I mean, we're a family.
The night, I will always remember in the backyard, Maddie coming to us. And sorry, I know I keep moving around. Maddie coming out, and she was just shaking. And we're like, it's okay. What is? And so she told us, and she was just falling apart. We just held her, just the three of us held her. And Lily had known for a couple of years and had kept it.
Bless her heart.
Which I do. Like I said, I wish Lily were here to share that because Lily was the go-to between our church leaders here that knew because someone had found out that Maddie was and told the church leaders here. And so they were talking with Lily about how if they could talk to us that she was gay. And anyway, poor Lily was in the middle of this for quite a while.
That we were unaware of.
That we were unaware that... Yeah, and Lily kept the faith with Maddie and didn't share that. But the night after that night, we went to bed after Maddie.
Can I just say, any belief system that makes children not feel comfortable being honest with their parents is a problem.
Correct.
Or that makes a kid have to, keep secrets about their other sibling from their parents, red flag.
Correct.
I didn't know that she was going through all of that either. I didn't know that she was cornered or that she was talking to... She really did kind of save my skin, and I didn't even know. Here, Lily, you're the best. Like in Santa Cruz. But
kudos to Lil.
Yeah, totally. I didn't know either.
But wait, let me just finish. So we're hugging and crying, and we're saying it's going to be okay. And Scott and I go up into our room, and we're laying in bed and then holding each other and saying, I really feel like God helped us get out of this church so we could be there for Maddie. Like God or whoever you want to believe in, the universe, helped us realize that the church wasn't true. Because as sucky as it is, if I hadn't learned that the priesthood was not real, for all the horrible things that the church has done, I still had to say, yeah, those are horrible things, but the church is still true. But because I had let that go, then I could fully accept her and love her and not judge her or try to change her or anything. Just be sorry that I hadn't experienced that earlier. But like I said, it was very confirming to us that karma or whatever had a hand in us leaving so she could come out to us.
This was a matter of prayer for us. I mean, we had left, we hadn't formally walked out yet, but we had decided to, so we had all but left the church. But she and I were praying together about how we can help our little girl, and we both felt, I have to say that I felt the same thing Joanna felt, that we felt comfort from God that this painful journey we'd been on put us in a position where we would not reject our daughter. Because I shudder when I think about had she come out 4 years earlier or 5 years earlier. And I'm afraid of how many mistakes I might have made. And it's terrible. It's terrifying. And I'm so glad that it worked out the way it did, as painful as it was. But we never looked back. I mean, it wasn't a question. But I don't know if it would have been before.
So... Maddie, I'm dying to know. First of all, this is amazing. Thank you for your vulnerability, for sharing. Super powerful. and your siblings' love and support for you is amazing. And shout out to Lily, you're awesome. And I don't want to sound like I'm sidetracking, but I'm just dying to know, how do you be, I hate these terms, actively gay? How do you live the gay lifestyle? Like, I hate all those terms, but how do you be gay at BYU? Like, how does that work?
Well, there's a couple of different.
Like at some point, I'm guessing you kissed this friend, right? I'm guessing
Yes,
you guys
this
started
girl.
like being like girlfriends, right? But you're at
Yeah.
BYU, and I would like to hear some. And I'm not trying to ask anything like prurient or sexually explicit, but like, how do you be gay at BYU?
Well, I'll just tell my story. I mean, there's a lot of different stories, in the last couple of years, even. A lot of my friends who are gay at BYU have different stories, and there was a lot of same ones. Like I know a lot of people who are gay who have the same kind of background of being the Mormon, like the upstanding Mormon. And I think we've talked a lot about that, and how a lot of gay and queer Mormon youth try to compensate or some way. And I think I totally fell into that too. But at BYU, I think I benefited a little bit. It's a more progressive age, and I. Also, being a woman, you can be affectionate in public with another woman, and it's often not even a problem, as opposed to gay men.
It's just they're friends. They just really love each other.
We're just buds,
best friends,
just gal pals, right?
Uh-huh.
But since we're in the same hall too, I think some people probably figured it out. I don't really know how we got out of BYU without being reported. But yeah, we eventually started dating. I told her that I was like, by the way, I think I like you back. Do you want to try this out? But it actually ended up being, for me at least, the next year of my freshman year I didn't accept it very quickly. I realized that I was gay, and then it was like the next 6 to 8 months, the rest of my freshman year was waffling between, do I go and choose this active gay lifestyle and try to date this girl who was into me back? It was like, this is exciting. Or do I reject that and try to go on the mission? Do I try to submit my papers? And everybody else in the hall and all the boys too were submitting their papers. And I knew that was on everybody's mind. And I wanted to go. So it was kind of waffling between back and forth. I eventually did go talk to the bishop.
Ooh.
And
You confessed.
I confessed, and I oddly enough, I still like this guy. I think he was a good guy. I think it was being a bishop at BYU is a weird combination of being a bishop with young kids, and then there's like academic stuff on top of that. So the ecclesiastical endorsement and all of that kind of stuff. Anyway, but I eventually talked to my bishop. Told him that, I was gay, that I had kissed a girl. And then I went back and kept meeting with him. And I told him I was going to try to figure this out. I was going to go on the mission, and I wanted his help. And this was all new to me too, was talking to the bishop and trying to repent about anything was totally new. So I didn't really know what to do going into it. I just kind of eventually went in and broke down like I did now, and just like, I'm gay. But one of the meetings in, I also didn't tell this other girl that I was going to go meet the bishop. I eventually just told her that I met with him, and then she had to go in too, and that was all drama as well.
So you named her.
I did. I named her, which I still feel a little guilty about. But I was trying to be. I meant it when
It's
I
a pressure cooker, like the honor code and the law of
Totally.
chastity and the whole religious culture.
Totally. And
It's
as
a
much as
pressure
I
cooker.
was lying to my family now, I couldn't lie to my bishop. I mean, he had the Spirit of God. He would have been able to tell. Been like, like, beeper, you're wrong. I went in and I told him, and the story of going on a mission, eventually I told him that I had made out with this girl, and that was a new level. And so then he said, oh, okay, really? And in Mormon terms, I even brought up heavy petting, at the risk of being too graphic. But I wanted to repent for it so I could get over it and then move on and submit my papers. But he said, oh, really? And he actually started asking questions about that. And looking back, I'm like, oh, those were kind of not so great questions. But he said, okay, well, actually, Maddie, I'm going to have to talk to the stake president about this. He also asked if I would stop taking the sacrament. And this was before coming home for the holidays, which was terrifying. This is still my freshman year. I decided to go on to become an RA because of this story with my bishop. He said something about the mission. Anyway, I'm going to try to speed up, but I came back from the holidays. I was still not taking the sacrament, met with the bishop again, and he said, well, I talked with the stake president, and we prayed together and decided that we're going to have to put a 2-year delay on you submitting your mission papers. And the first thing I thought was, what am I going to tell my parents? Like, I can't apply. What am I going to do the next couple of years? Like, everybody's expecting Maddie the Mormon to go on the mission and to go, somewhere fun and to learn French again. And then, but I couldn't. And so I came up with this new lie of, well, I have a new calling and I'm going to be an RA. That's my new mission. And I remember you asked me about that later, and I was totally just fumbling through my answer. Being, well, this is my new designated calling. This is my new mission, is to be an RA. And frankly, I did actually love being an RA the next year at Helaman Halls.
I was an RA in Helaman Halls.
It's fun. You're helping these young, excited Mormon kids, and you're helping them through college.
How did you get away from them yanking your ecclesiastical endorsement and kicking you out of BYU, reporting you to the honor code? Like, I guess I don't understand how that works, because I would have assumed you would have been booted.
I think a large reason was because I went to my bishop about it, and
you weren't caught. You confessed.
I wasn't caught. I was confessed.
You weren't caught.
I wasn't caught. I confessed.
Yeah.
And I was sincere for the whole time meeting with him back and forth. Even when I would make a mistake and kiss her again or go on a date or something, I would come back and tell him about it and say, like, I'm so sorry. Does this put me out another couple of weeks or something? And I think if I hadn't done that and somebody had found out, they absolutely could have reported me. I also think some people have horror stories at BYU. I kind of lucked out. First of all, I met a girl at Helaman Halls, and that doesn't usually happen. But the other thing I think was because I went and confessed. But the whole thing with my bishop, I didn't take the sacrament either. Once he asked me, I think it was as early as November of 2013. I eventually followed up with him about it, and I wasn't taking the sacrament for, I think, almost 3 months or longer. And finally, towards the end of my, what is that, fall, winter term, the BYU has a weird, I think it's winter semester, so the end of my freshman year, I eventually went and saw him again, and I at this point didn't really trust him anymore because of the whole 2-year thing. I had thought about it, and I thought, that's crazy. All I had done was, make out, and I had known people who had been drinking the week before they go on their mission, and they're fine.
There are people that have sex and then still go on their mission.
The night before.
And they don't have to wait 2 years. Yeah.
Totally. And that was starting to weigh on me a little bit. And I was also kind of feeling more, finally, better about my sexuality. And I went and asked him, confronted him. I said, please, can I take the sacrament again? And he said, you haven't been taking the sacrament? I'm so sorry. You should have been taking it weeks ago. And that was another huge moment. The too good to be true red pill moment for me was huge. And then that moment with my bishop, talking to him, and I had not taking the sacrament sucks because I couldn't understand why I wasn't either. It was the whole thing of, I should be taking the sacrament. I should be trying to every week renew my covenants and renew, my faith and everything like that. But I wasn't. And then the second thing was he forgot. And I had been not taking the sacrament even when I was home for the holidays that Christmas. And that was horrible. Like, knowing that, I was... I think so. And I couldn't take the sacrament, and I was up on the podium, and I was trying to either take it and put it in my pocket. I can't remember what I did. It was, kind of a shaky moment.
Maddie.
But that was not quite traumatic, but horrible. And I remember a New Year's party that year too, and when we had the most wonderful family friends in our ward, that when we had traditions of, holiday parties, and we went to this New Year's party. I remember just going and feeling like this dirty sinner, and that nobody else there knew that I was, that I was gay. They loved this other person, and they didn't know. So coming back and my bishop saying, you should have been taking, I'm so sorry. Like, essentially, I forgot. It shook me. And that was kind of the second thing. After my relationship to God, after I was pointing a finger at him and saying, why would you do this to me? It was, wait a second. there's no God in this bishop's office either. That was the other big thing.
Yeah, because on the one hand, people are going to say, well, that's unrealistic. Of course, bishops forget things and make mistakes. On the other hand, you're thinking of them as being God's mouthpiece.
Right.
And so it's not just like, oh, we all make mistakes as humans. It's like, look, what you're asking me to do is really hard. You're putting me through the ringer. You're asking me to go against my nature.
Totally.
This is, in some ways, a life or death situation. And you forgot,
I just forgot. Like I didn't have to go through all of that. It really called not only just God and faith, but the church into question for the first time for me.
Yeah.
But that was very different than church history.
Yeah. Just to kind of close out that. So, and we'll come back to the story, but like the other thing that's just mind blowing, and I get this all the time, is a kid losing their faith at BYU, but having 2 or 3 years left. And it's this thing where they either lie and feel awful and then have to just like, be in this culture that can be just super toxic if you're not really into it. Or you be honest and come clean and open. And again, be honest. And then you can get kicked out and thrown out of your university. And then because somehow most of BYU credits don't transfer to other universities because they have weird classes and religious stuff and whatever, you're basically adding another year or two onto your education by the time you get kicked out, have to transfer, your credits don't transfer, you're starting over. And that's can be tens of thousands of dollars and years of your life. So you're caught between that rock and a hard place of being a liar and living, feeling guilt and shame, and the risk of having major setbacks to your life.
Right. And at this point I was that meeting with the bishop, whenever that was, I think it was.
Wait, I have to add one thing. Okay. And it's not like you were allowed as a teen to explore your sexuality so that you could know, well, I'm not going to go to BYU, I'm gay, right? That would be bad. Instead, you're going to BYU, signing the honor code, thinking that you're straight because you love the Lord and you love the gospel, but you were never allowed to date because you don't date in Mormonism before your mission anyway, usually. And so it's not even like you entered into signing the honor code with full knowledge and consent because you weren't even allowed to gather the information about yourself, let alone about the church.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I love that you're just like, amen, brother. Like,
Sorry.
I even signed the honor code to the cameras when I was 17.
Yeah.
Before I was an adult, but that's just me being my little rant. But you're right. And I started lying in that meeting with my bishop. I didn't trust him anymore. I didn't trust the church. I didn't trust anyone around me, but I couldn't tell my parents about this. I couldn't transfer because like, by the way, mom and dad, I wasn't out yet. So it was kind of like I was forced, not really, but it felt like I was being pushed to living this lie now. I couldn't leave and but I didn't really want to stay, but I didn't really want to leave either. And that was kind of what it was. And I think that's how it is for a lot of gay kids at BYU.
And I'm just going to say it again. Churches that foster a culture of lying are a problem. Of all things, not only should churches not make kids uncomfortable talking to their parents, but churches should not nurture and foster a culture of lying. Right? A church of all places should be a safe place to be honest, in my opinion.
Right. So fast forward to 2016 when she comes out to us, that spring.
Wait, I'm sorry. One more thing. 2015 November must have been devastating.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, you know what? By the policy, I guess, that it actually didn't really affect me. I had a similar reaction to my dad. I was so distant by that point, and I was just kind of living my own life and lying to everybody else that I first found out about that it was a leak, and I laughed. I was like, of course they're going to do something dumb. I didn't read it. I just heard that there was some horrible thing. And then the rest of the day, all of my gay friends were like broken up about it. And I finally went and read it that night and was like, oh, this is horrible. But that was it. Like, it was just another thing.
Of course the church did something
Yeah,
horrible
it really
to
was.
LGBT
It was like, of
people.
course, like, screw them. So that was it for me. But it was significant that my dad called about it because it was a gay thing. And it meant that it was significant to him.
Right. Okay, Joanna, sorry.
No, it's okay. I just was going to say, by the time she came out to us at 16, and we said, do you want to leave BYU and transfer? Like, what do you want to do? And for her, she's like, well, I've been doing this for 2 years now. But that was our first question was like, well, do you want to stay or you want to transfer? And by then, I think you had 3 semesters left. And we didn't even know about your film yet, which you had applied for fall of 15 before the policy. And that film, so you were already kind of locked in because the film department approved your...
No, they didn't. I was let into the film program, and then I had this film on the side that I was working on.
So now everyone's going to want to know what this film is that we're talking about.
Well, promo. I'm working on a documentary film about this, about being gay at BYU, and in large part...
Talk about how it happened, because I remember it was kind of a news story at the time.
It was kind of a news story. It happened... I was applying to the film program, and part of the application to the film program required a 3-minute sample video. Pretty much just make any kind of video and prove to them that you can turn on a camera, that you can tell a story kind of thing. And I couldn't figure out what to do a little sample video on. And I had some friends that, we were kind of sitting in the room, and the deadline was far approaching. And this was before the November 5th, 20 policy change. Policy leak, and I can't remember who it was in the room, but mentioned just like, why don't you just do a short documentary about us, like about the gay kids at BYU? That's fascinating enough. Kind of being like it was an easy thing to do.
Like USGA?
USGA, pretty much. Yeah. At that point, I think by then I was involved with USGA, which is an awesome off-campus group.
Tell us what that stands for.
It used to stand for what did it used to stand for?
Understanding same
gender attraction. Yeah. They recently changed it to understanding sexuality, gender, and allyship. But that changed. Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Same acronym. Nice.
That's
same
cool.
acronym. Well, they did it on purpose to keep the acronym because of like website and stuff and everything. By then, I was involved with USGA. I think I was doing Faces of USGA, one of their photojournalism projects, which is a lot of fun. But we did this. I had my friends help me, and I just kind of interviewed people that I knew that were my friends that were gay and that were at BYU, and did this short video. And I got into the film program. I think I submitted it. The deadline was October 31st, 2015. And which is relevant, obviously, because the policy change was literally within that week. Yeah. And I got into the program, thank heavens. And I remember one of my professors the next semester, he said, Maddie, by the way, I went up to talk to him about a homework assignment. And he said, by the way, I wanted to corner you actually. I remember your sample video. And I was like, well, thank you. Yeah, it was a lot of fun, and it was really good to get the camera out. I didn't tell him that I was already kind of feeling the bug. When we had filmed that short video, and we were using a camcorder on like this broken tripod with like one of those iPhone lavaliers. But it was overwhelming, even back then, how many people wanted to talk to a camera about their story about being gay at BYU. It was really overwhelming, and I had kind of gotten this little feeling like there's something bigger here. Anyway, my professor talked to me and said, I remember your sample video, and that was one of the most emotionally powerful moments of anything I've ever seen. And I laughed. I was like, well, thank you. That's kind. Because it really was on a camcorder, like it wasn't this amazing thing. But he said, no, it was significant. And I think partially because it was right before the November 5th policy change. It was just the time. It was just people were ready and it was relevant. And so that that was one of those things that kind of cemented to me, and it really did feel like a calling, that this was a story that needed to be told now, and that we needed to be the ones to tell it, the gay people that needed to start telling the world our story. And that kind of kickstarted me and my friend Zoe. We've been doing this together since day one, into making this documentary film. We're hoping to make a feature about gay kids at BYU, and I really do hope that it kind of, they each have their own stories, and they identify as LGBT or Q, and I love them all dearly, and I really hope that their stories can, just like me coming out and everything, that they can do some good, that they can kind of shed some light on this crazy story of BYU kids.
So if somebody wants to learn more about this and support it, just because we're on the topic, where do they go?
SSAmovie.com.
Okay.
www.
Same-sex attraction movie.com?
Same-sex attracted movie, in quotation marks. We like the tongue-in-cheekness of it. Yeah.
I just have to say that feels like a little bit gutsy. I was going to say ballsy, but that's very
Ballsy's fine.
To apply to a BYU film program using a movie about being LGBT. Mm-hmm. Like, I would want to play it safe. I'm like, I'm not going there because I want to get accepted.
Maddie is freaking amazing.
That's pretty gutsy.
No.
Oh, come on, that's gutsy. That's
Well,
risky.
I feel guilty.
when you care about it that much.
I do, and I really do think that it can do some good, because these are regular kids who are gay and who are at the Lord's University, and that means something. Just them living and just how they're living and everything like that. So I'm excited about it because I really hope that it can do some good.
Yeah.
But I feel guilty at the same time because that sample video applying to the film program with it. It really was an easy year because I was gay and I just interviewed my friends.
I know, but how it's put together is awesome. Is that on the link? Can you see the trailer? The little
will be.
Yes,
it wasn't, but yes, I guess now. It was called "What's It Like Being Queer at BYU." Is
Okay.
what it was called.
All right. So the link again is what?
www.ssamovie.com.
All right. You need to get that done.
I know I need to. We've been working on it since then.
You just need money, or what do you
need money, and we're editing now constantly in every half hour of my free time.
well.
How much money do you need, honestly?
Honestly,
Yeah.
that number kind of changes based on
always
time
does.
that it
Yeah.
the more time we're editing on our own, the less money that we need,
Yeah.
kind of thing. But if we get as much money as we can up front, that would help expedite the
Are we
process.
talking $100,000, $5,000? What are you talking?
Honestly, $50,000 would be more than enough to get us to the quality that we
Okay.
want to.
Well, and Utah Film Foundation has picked you guys up, or not picked you guys up. You've applied.
They are my heroes, and they fiscally sponsor our film too, which is amazing. And they have a wonderful team there too. They actually just released. They have shirts for Pride this year that just says Utah Film Center and it's rainbow, and I'm gonna get one. But they fiscally sponsored our film too, so any donation to our film through them is tax deductible. So it's
What's their website?
UtahFilmCenter.org.
Okay. Awesome. Okay, back to you guys.
Well, that was awesome.
That was amazing. Yeah. That's
Thanks for the
fantastic.
promo. The free advertising.
All right. So
I think we end it there. Our daughter's amazing. We love her. How's that?
No. So like, how's it been since then? Like, thank goodness that you had, like, God inspired you guys to go through this transition so you could be there for Maddie, so that she wouldn't do what many other LGBT Mormon kids do, which is contemplate ending their life, right? And she may have even done that anyway, but at least she didn't have to do that without feeling like her parents were supportive.
Right.
So where have you guys, how's it come since then?
So after that, we got hobbled through 2016. Well, that spring, I still had my state calling with camp, and that was in July. So even though we weren't officially out of the church, we hadn't been since beginning of June, but we were out of town. Summer, it's kind of weird. So did camp that summer, and letting go of camp was harder for me than stopping going to church.
Why?
Camp for our stake, the camp that we go to, there are 9 stakes in this region that go there every year.
Girls camp.
Girls camp. And we meet twice a year with the other stake leaders and decide things. And anyway, it's such a unique, wonderful place where I feel like I actually have done some good. Because so many things that we do in the church are just busy stuff, just busy work, and I don't know if you really affect people. But I feel like at camp, and especially that year, summer of 16, that last Friday night, Scott mentioned before the testimony meeting, I let it off with my testimony, and I just testified of God and prayer and the things that I could, and express my love to the girls, and that, no matter what happened, God would always be there for them, and they could reach out to God. And the stake president knew, and 2 other people there knew that I was kind of heading out. And it was a great camp, and the stake president, even by that September, had asked me if I could still do that calling, and I knew that I couldn't just keep going to church because he didn't want the girls to see me not ever go to church and then go to camp. And they'd be like, well, why doesn't Sister Purves? What?
I just want to clarify.
Why doesn't she wear garments?
I just want to clarify it's one thing.
Okay.
He knew he'd left the church. He still wanted Joanna to continue to be the camp director that summer and the following summer. and this is a man, he's a different stake president now, who is a good man. And he trusted Joanna, even though she told him that she didn't have a testimony of the church. He trusted her to talk about what she did have a testimony of. I think that speaks very highly of this man that's the stake president.
Yeah, he's a good guy.
And the bishop of our ward at the time, equally as good a man.
We really lucked out because I've heard so many stories where just, I mean, for you're like, just stake presidents and bishops who are, and ward members or stake members who are mean, and we haven't. People were sad, and they would kind of reach out and like, where are you? What's happened? But then we just would say, we need to take a break for a while because we didn't want to rock any boats. We didn't want to, especially with youth, I didn't want to make them go through the same process. If they asked me or if they later wanted to talk about it, I would, but I didn't want to make a big, huge production. We're leaving the church and it's not true and blah, blah, blah. Like,
We wanted to wait till now and do a podcast.
Well, yeah, but it's 3 years later. And the people who see this or listen to this are people who are having issues.
Can I ask you just really quickly, and we're not even doing workshops and retreats right now. We are doing Thrive, but was the workshop that you came to a Mormon Stories workshop in Anaheim?
Yeah.
Yes.
Was that valuable? And if so, or what was the value? And if it wasn't valuable, I don't care.
Completely.
What did that mean to you?
The last time we went into church was June of 16, and that my dad passed away. We went and told my dad. We took Lily to Utah State for her freshman year, and then drove up north of Rexburg to see my parents and to officially come out to them that we were leaving the church. Because
How was that?
Awful.
How did you do it? Because people want to know, how do I come out to my parents?
Well, they had heard sort of through the grapevine that something was up.
How?
Siblings talking.
Your brother.
I mentioned a while ago.
I'm 2 of 7, and
okay.
My sister lives here in town. I have a sister in Carson City. I mean, yeah.
And my former mission companion, AP guy, he left the church about 15 years ago, and he's married to Joanna's sister.
Right.
And so their family has gone through this bumpy ride for years, and they didn't leave together. So they had a much longer, dragged out thing. So her parents had been through this once before.
Did Joanna leave too? I mean, your sister?
She stopped once they moved here to Davis about 6 years ago. Then she stopped attending church.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know what we'd say on. I wouldn't speak for them, but
okay.
But when we went to Idaho to sit down with her folks, her father, who I love dearly, he's passed on, but he looked terrible, and he was clearly very sick that we didn't know about. So we walked into that, and he looked thin and sort of gaunt.
Oh, we knew right away.
We knew he was sick.
We got out of the car and thought, oh.
Yeah, he's in bad shape. And that was unfortunately, that was my last conversation with him. He asked me if I'd come out in the backyard, which I knew wasn't a good sign. And I said, well, I really would like Joanna to be with me so we can talk about this. And he said, no, I want to know what you think. Old school.
Man to man.
Old school. We're going to talk this boy.
Man to man.
Yeah. And I thought, he's going to kill me. And to my surprise, I knew he was well-read, but I thought he was well-read on like Nibley. He was well-read on Seer Stones and Mike Quinn stuff. He knew his stuff.
But you had not known that.
I didn't know that.
Because we don't tell each other things.
No. And I mean, I've talked to him. He and I would have these awesome long conversations about the gospel and the kingdoms and preaching the gospel to the dead and all these different cool things. But I never knew he knew any of this stuff. And he listened. And so here's this old cowboy who you wouldn't think of as being this empathetic listener. And he was very empathetic and listening. And at the end, he bore testimony, and he told me some stories that were incredibly powerful spiritual experiences of his. And he asked me, what do I do with that if the church isn't true?
Right.
And I said,
he got vulnerable.
He did. And I told him, I don't know. I mean, it's a question I'm still dealing with. And so, and the last thing he said to me before we drove away was, I never thought I'd see you in this position. And I said, Dave, I never thought I would be in this position. He was kind to me, which I'll always be grateful for. He was very disappointed. And then he died about 6 weeks later.
Oh, no.
Yeah, and he went really fast with cancer.
Yeah, so that was...
But then we had dinner together, the four of us, after he and I had our man-to-man. And
my mother and father and Scott and I. Yeah.
And then it got hot.
Well, my mom... Yeah.
Her mom, I can say this with her not in the room. Her mom...
Well, she might listen.
Well, she might. Her mom and her and I are all a little feisty. And I think she would agree with that. And she was upset. I mean, her son-in-law was dragging her daughter and grandchildren out of the church. And she was upset about it, and I was upset about it. And we started to argue, and then my father-in-law said, "Nope, spirit of contention, we're shutting this down. We're family, we love each other." I mean, so he reinforced the love of family. And anyway, so it was really uncomfortable. It didn't go well, but it didn't end up in yelling and screaming or any of that kind of stuff. And I'm glad we went and had a face-to-face, especially because we didn't know how ill he was. But I think you just have to do it. I think if you're in that position where you have parents or in-laws and you need to talk, I think you just do it. You do it privately. You do it in the best place or way for your relationship. But I was the in-law there, not the son. So
I get asked this question a lot, and I actually use the example: if they're 90 years old, on their deathbed, dying of cancer, why would you ever want to tell them? But you're basically saying you did tell him when he was kind of on his relative deathbed, though you didn't totally know it. And you're glad you did. Why in this case? And I'll just admit, there's never a right answer in any scenario for all scenarios.
Everyone has a different life.
If I had known he was 6-8 weeks before his death, I may not have gone up there, only because of what you said. Why bother the poor guy?
Then again, they kind of had a heads up anyway. They knew something was up.
They already knew.
Yeah.
Well, something was up, and it was just a courtesy to them to talk about it instead of just lying over the phone.
or even talking over the phone. For us, it felt like the right thing to do is to do it in person. So that's what we did. But we thought a lot about it before we went up. The weird part was kind of like right this second, I did most of the talking. And I didn't want it that way, but that's kind of how it went, because it was either me talking to him or me talking to her, and then Joanna trying to dive in, and it got kind of rough, so we shut it down. But my father-in-law, I thought, did a really great job being kind. My family was different. So my parents were more like my kids. They'd heard me talking about this stuff for so doggone long that they weren't really shocked. They were sad. But my dad told me that he didn't like it, but he respected my integrity, which was the only thing I wanted to hear from him. And he took me fishing. He could see that I was kind of torn up inside. And so he booked a trip to Alaska, and the two of us went fishing. And we spent like 3 days, and all we talked about was fishing. And we didn't talk about the church. And if we wanted to, we could have, but we just talked about fishing and eating fish and grizzly bears and all the Alaska stuff. And it was, and his best friend from youth, who he's hunted with forever, Mark, he came. And he knew I needed to be out in the sun fishing and getting away from all this stuff for a bit.
Now, some might say, well, that's avoidance. That's like, I can't believe we didn't ever talk about it. Like, some would be disappointed that the elephant in the room wasn't discussed. But I guess you had already told him.
No, yeah, let me clarify. He knew what was going on. There was no secret there.
Before, but you're glad you didn't talk about it. Why?
No, we did talk about it before.
Okay.
On the trip, we didn't, because the trip was kind of like medicine.
Right.
It was.
You'd already talked about it.
It was just, and you know, when I was a boy, we would go fishing.
Yeah.
And this was Dad taking care of his boy, even though I was in my 40s. And it was a beautiful gesture. It was really it was a trip that was wonderful, and I loved, and I'll always treasure. But we were able to have some heart-to-hearts about family and our wives and children and all that stuff. So we spent a lot of time talking. We just didn't spend a lot of time on church history stuff.
Well, and Scott's parents, like I mentioned, they're so different than my parents. Their understanding of basic gospel doctrine was very minimal. They didn't get a lot.
Your parents.
Scott's parents.
My folks.
They didn't get a lot of things. So I think even if you talked about church history issues, that they would have said, why is that an issue? Like they just.
Although I have one memory of my dad when I was a kid saying, because he loved history and he read a lot of it, and I don't know what church history stuff he read, but I remember him saying that it really bothered him, this idea of Joseph riding up and down the streets of Nauvoo with a sword in his hand, being called general.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, what are you talking about? But it bothered him. So.
Joanna, I don't want to run too fast over this. Like, you came from the more Orthodox family.
Right.
So having that conversation with your parents must have been really hard for you. And then Scott says later it got volatile. A lot of people are like, I don't want to have a confrontation with my parents, or it'll be too much or be too overwhelming. How did you work through that?
Well, my dad just said, let's call a break. And then we had to leave early the next morning. So we did. And,
but disappointing, how did you cope with disappointing your parents? It's just psychologically.
I threw up in the car on the way home. On the drive back down to the airport.
Really?
Yep. I had a panic attack and thought my heart was dying and pulled over, and I thought I was going to pass out, and then I threw up.
That's intense.
Yeah, it was pretty intense. But we got through it.
We were laying in bed one night here after that, not long, and I thought I was having a heart attack. And it felt like my heart was about 8 inches out of my chest.
Well, and it was.
And I couldn't breathe. And she pulled me out of the bed and stood me up and was about to call 911, and then it receded. I mean, there are some physical things that happened to both of us that were so crazy.
Yeah, over the last 5 years, and even still, we have flare-ups of physical manifestations from stress.
And what
I enunciated that very well,
that
didn't
great.
I?
But what it comes down to for so many is, how can I disappoint my parents? I love them, I respect them,
Right.
or I fear them.
Right.
How do I live with myself becoming a disappointment to them? So I'm going to ask you, how have you both come to be comfortable or live with yourself or not be super depressed or, suicidal, knowing that you've both become a huge disappointment in some ways to your parents?
And my siblings.
and
Scott was saying,
siblings.
no, I think of myself.
Yeah,
because
that's what I mean.
I've been in their shoes, and I know that they're putting my name in the temple because I'm lost, and I know that they're praying for me, and I know they love me. It's not a question of that at all. But every time, we have a text or something like that, it could be as random as, with this new policy with the change in age for priesthood for 11-year-olds, and the girls, they can go to the temple now. So now 11-year-olds can be in youth programs. And so I have nieces and nephews who are this age, and for them it's this exciting, wonderful thing, and how exciting that they got to speak in church and they got to go to the temple, and this is just life for them. And for me, I get this text and I'm reading it, and it's just like, it just is constant feeling like I'm letting them down because I'm supposed to be the spiritual giant in our family, the Nephitess or whatever. and I've let them all down, and I can't, and they are all hoping that I'll come back. And therapy. I have, on my outline, I have capital therapy has helped me so much, thinking of self-care. And when I start to do the spinning of letting people down, or, the wiring I have of always put others before yourself. And I think of therapy tools that she's given me
Is this a therapist we know or just a local person?
So she's a local person. She's a former Jehovah's Witness.
Oh, wow.
And
That's cool.
She has a group of people who have been in these high demand religions.
Nice.
And
I want to meet this woman.
Her specialty is religious trauma.
It's fascinating because we'll go to this group and everyone's talking the same thing. It's the same language. Doesn't matter if you're Jehovah's Witness or Seventh-day Adventist or any high demand religion. It's the same trauma and then exit afterwards.
Yeah.
Something that she's given us books to read about high demand
Cults.
religions.
You're trying not to say cults.
Say the C word.
No, but just thinking about self-care for myself and that people have to be responsible for their own feelings. I can't be responsible for them being hurt. Does that make sense? Like I'm living my life, and if they choose to be hurt with how I'm living my life, they have to figure it out. They're going to have to go to therapy and figure it out. I can't figure it out for them. And I can't live my life and be authentic for them. I have to only do it for myself because my body's shutting down and it has major stress because I'm trying to live this life that it's not authentic. So therapy has been huge.
Tell them what you did with the group text.
Oh, I have taken a time out from my siblings and mom.
How'd you tell them that?
One sister reached out to me and said, hey, I kind of wanted to start a group text about things that we're reading in the scriptures. Would that be comfortable for you? Which is thoughtful that she even thought maybe it'd be uncomfortable for me. And I texted back and said, no, and I talked about triggers and how even now things will just start me spinning down this depression cycle and I feel guilty and bad. And it's like picking off a scab over and over and over instead of fully healing. So I've had a break from my family. And like I said, even if they were talking about the sky is blue, it's just hearing their name or seeing their name would make me think that I'm disappointing them and they're thinking about me and they're praying for me. So I just took a break and I still am.
Meaning you're not in much communication with them?
Correct.
For how long?
It's been a couple months.
Okay.
But I also have a sister who was also out of the church or doesn't go. And she's in constant communication with them. So she's like I have my own little guardian angel that passes on information between us. She's my filter. So I did talk to my mom on Mother's Day. My mom is serving a mission in Manitoba.
Really quickly, I have to do just a quick coaching moment. Something that just came to me in a moment as I was doing one of these workshops is there's a difference between hurting your family's feelings and hurting your family.
Right.
And oftentimes, hurting your family's feelings is actually promoting growth in you and your family. So yes, it hurts, but just like lifting weights hurts your muscles, but then they grow. Sometimes we're scared to hurt our family members, but we're not hurting them. We're hurting their feelings, but it's discomfort that leads to growth.
Right.
And it gives you a chance to declare your emotional, psychological independence and to get your own self healthy. But it also gives them a chance to learn to be more open and tolerant, because you're probably not going to be the last person to leave the church in their lives. It'll be their parents, their siblings, their children, their grandchildren. It's coming.
Yeah.
It's coming for you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it will be uncomfortable for them, but it will be growth for them.
Yeah.
They'll learn, hopefully, they'll either become small and petty and insignificant, and then you don't want that relationship, or over time, they'll heal, they'll grow, they'll become more accepting, more tolerant, and they'll be better off. So you didn't hurt them. You hurt their feelings temporarily. Well, and there's a difference.
Something my therapist also said is you're hurting yourself.
Yeah.
So it's okay to not hurt them, but it's okay to hurt yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
So you're hurting somebody.
Yeah. And by the way, you talked about physical manifestations. We're talking about Epstein-Barr, chronic fatigue,
kidney
depression,
disease,
kidney disease, liver, there are all sorts of, there are all sorts of people who are super sick over the internalizing of religious related distress.
Yeah, that's me.
Physical ulcers,
Do you wanna talk
stomach
about that?
aches, irritable bowel. Like we could probably list a whole 50 ailments, including anxiety and depression, that are a direct result of internalizing, of suppressing, of subduing your own well-being to concerns about trying to take care of somebody else's
Right.
feelings or impressions of you.
Yeah.
And don't make yourself sick. Stop making yourself sick. You're not doing you any good and you're not doing them any good making yourself sick. So don't make yourself sick.
There's a good book called The Body Keeps Account.
Right.
And it's this,
Yeah.
it's that principle is that somewhere, no matter what you're suppressing, your body, it's gonna come out.
Yeah.
So
So
I've had a lot of health issues these last 3 years.
Maddie wants to say something really quick.
I also kind of, I don't know, there's a lot of parallels, I think, between our coming out stories. And I also kind of want to give my parents some props. I think I've lucked out with just how wonderful they've been. And I also kind of think, and I don't want to be like, there's hope for everybody, because that's just unfortunately not true. You know, I know so many unfortunate horror stories of other people who have come out to their parents and it's not safe, or friends or anything like that. But I think it also, you know, it's a very similar parallel of it's just the way it is. And I love my parents. I love my family enough. I want to be real. And I want to live a real life, and I want to make real relationships with them. And I want to have the real me, have a real relationship with my real family. Mm-hmm. And I think that I kind of watched my parents come out and be honest about their transitions in faith. And that kind of gave me a little bit of strength in being honest with myself and thinking, no, I'm genuinely this way. I'm not going to change, and I don't need to change for anybody else. This is who I am. And I need to kind of, you know, like come out to them and tell them this is who I am. And it's not exactly the same. Like, just like it's not the same as being gay as it is being a person of color. It's not the same at all. But there are a lot of parallels with our stories of living authentically and why that is significant. And I don't know, I wanted to, you know, give them a little promo or little props.
Absolutely. Amen.